I don't know how to fix a ceiling fan, but I do know that I have more Super Famicom games to talk about. So I believe this is the fourth time in this Nihon no Konyo Shokai series that I'm talking about Super Famicom games. I still have so many to talk about, so let's knock out another 6. The first 2 games I'm going to talk about are games I'm not at all qualified to talk about. You'll know right away, but they are Shin Megami Tensei and Shin Megami Tensei 2. Both on Super Famicom, and these games need no introduction, but they are the first 2 games specifically in the Shin Megami Tensei series, both of which are part of the bigger Megami Tensei series franchise, I should say, and that we've talked about Megami Tensei pretty recently with Devil Summoner in the Too Many Games video, and I also think I've shown off a Persona game at some point in the past, so yeah, Megami Tensei is huge. But these 2 games are the first 2 games in the Shin Megami Tensei series, and also the very first 2 releases of those games, like the original Shin Megami Tenseis. So the first game was released in Japan in October 1992, and the second game was released in March 1994, both of which were developed and published by Atlus, which, if you've watched this channel, you know every time that I say Atlus, I have to say Dokapon Kingdom. So as far as I can tell, the only the first game was localized in North America, and I believe it came on the 20th anniversary of the second game in March 2014, but it was only on iOS, which is like really strange. I guess it wasn't worthy of a I don't know, a virtual console release. But I think these games were initially not localized because they were deemed too inappropriate for Western audiences. So by the time they could have been localized, they weren't projected to do financially well, so they were kind of just left in the past. But that's not to say they aren't huge pieces of Megami Tensei history. So that's not really a lot of info, but if you know this series, you don't need me to tell you about these games. It has been cool, I will say, though, to see more games that are stemming from Megami Tensei, because I just don't really know a lot about the games. So like getting Devil Summoner in the Too Many Games video was pretty cool. But yeah, now I have the first 2, and I don't think these are the only 2 I'm going to show off at some point on this channel. But anyway, we move on. The next one is Royal Conquest on Super Famicom, which is a November 1992 side-scrolling strategy game developed by Argonaut. Argonaut is the same studio as the first Star Fox, but they have a decent catalog with like Croc, Disney games, Harry Potter games, Bionicle even, and it was published by Jalico Entertainment, and it would come to North America 4 months later in March 1993 as King Arthur's World. So the game somewhat loosely follows the story of King Arthur, and your job is to command King Arthur's army in getting from, get this, in a side-scrolling game, from the start of the level to the end of the level. Who would have thought? So the game has a lot of strategy elements, like, for example, all of your different equipment, all of your different troopers, if you will, have different methods, different strengths, and you don't really care if your troopers die. So this might be the first example I have personally ever seen of a side-scroller that isn't a platformer and is more reliant on the strategy elements, which is kind of cool because I feel like we see more strategy games are at least 2D as opposed to just 2D side-scrolling. But whatever the case, it's still pretty cool. If there's more games like this, I would love to know, because I think that's pretty fascinating, but this is the only one I think I've ever heard of being like that. Is it the first? I don't know. Is it the last? Probably not, but still pretty neat in my opinion. That's basically it. That's basically all I need to say about the game. It looks pretty unique, I will say, but it's also a game that uses the Super Nintendo mouse that originally came bundled with Mario Paint. So that's interesting. Royal Conquest. Next up is an interesting one, and this is Sword World SFC. SFC would be the abbreviation for Super Famicom, but I didn't know this, but there's a Japanese tabletop game called Sword World that was first published in 1989, but as someone who has never played and will never play Dungeons and Dragons or other tabletop games like that, this game is basically that. More specifically, the original game is basically that. And despite the title being Sword World, I believe the combat is more magic-based. So, like, where are the swords, dog? I don't know. But there have been very few adaptations of the original Sword World, but this is one of them. The first one was on Japanese home computers. This is the second one, releasing in August 1993, around 4 years after the original game released. And it's developed and published by T&E Soft, a studio who I don't think has a lot, or at least not a lot of games that I recognized. They did a port of Dragon's Lair. They have a ton of golfing games, so like that's something. I don't know. But a lot of the settings I think are based on like an unrelated novel series. So I mean that like kind of relates to them, but like whatever the case is, the settings are based on some novel series, and this specific release is based on 2 novels in those series. But that's as far as I got before diving into a really big rabbit hole of this said Japanese novel series. So it's like kind of cool. And the game had a sequel a year later on Super Famicom, which was Sword World 2. There was also a DS game in 2009, but I think Sword World in general, the entire series, has laid dormant since then. I didn't see anything else on like the Wikipedia page, didn't see any other games on GameFAQs, so I think Sword World on the whole is either dead or is just kind of hanging out in the background. But it is kind of cool to see that this game is based on a tabletop game, which is then based on a novel series, so a lot of like real world entertainment that this game is intertwined with, so that is really, really cool. However, this game, even though it's called Sword World, has no swords in it. At least that's what Wikipedia said. But a game that does actually have to do with swords is Magic Sword, which originally released in both Japanese and North American arcades in 1990, then was ported to the Super Famicom in May 1992, and then would release in North America on the Super Nintendo 3 months later in August 1992. So the original game and all of its ports were developed and published by Capcom, and it's a 2D side-scrolling fighting slash hack-and-slash-platformer. I think I named like 4 different genres in one, but you play as the Brave One in 50 levels of roughly all the same gameplay, 4 genres, 1 gameplay, I don't know, but your ultimate goal is to defeat the Dark Lord Drakmar. So I believe in the North American release you play as the Brave One, but in Japanese your name is Alan. Like, that's not a joke. Like the main character in the Japanese game is just Alan, A-L-A-N. So I don't know how North America was the Brave One and Japan got Alan, but it's kind of funny. I guess we had to appeal to North American audiences. But the game sounds pretty generic, as, you know, just like, I don't know, 50 levels of the same gameplay. But I mean, it's pretty unique from what I saw. It's pretty unique for having so many different genres that it can juggle at once, and maybe unique and interesting for the time. But either way, I remember seeing the gameplay and thinking, like, that's really, really cool. The original arcade game was received pretty well. The ports on Super Nintendo and Super Famicom were not received so well. But regardless, the game has been included in a bunch of Capcom compilations since then. So if this gameplay, this poor description sounds interesting to you at all, it sounds like it's pretty accessible. I don't remember the exact places that it was re-released on, but you look up almost any Capcom compilation, you'll probably find Magic Sword. So it also has a pretty neat ending that I wanted to note. So spoilers, move ahead 10 seconds if you care that much. But at the end of the game, you can choose to destroy the orb that made Drakmar the Dark Lord, or you can become the Dark Lord yourself. Ooh. I don't know. Pretty neat. The last game we're going to show off is one that you probably have seen before, maybe if you haven't heard of it, but this is Mario no Super Picross. So, first of all, nonograms are these puzzle games where you get a board of white cells, usually a square board of white cells. You have numbers across the top and across the side that tell you how many cells in that row or in that column are black cells. So you start with all white cells, and you need to color in cells to make them black, with usually the goal to make a picture. So it doesn't sound that difficult. I mean, it's a puzzle game, but you know, when you're on a 2x2 or a 3x3 board, maybe not that scary, but the second you get to like 4x4, 5x5, or 6x6, or even way bigger, it gets to be a lot more difficult. So the level curve is pretty steep. Like I said, the goal is to draw some sort of picture by blackening these cells. And if you still don't really know what I'm talking about, if you look up Nonogram or if you look up Picross, you'll see like these puzzles that look like every mobile game ad ever. So Nonogram puzzles haven't really been around all that long, with the first picture drawn in this way, I think Wikipedia is saying, was in 1987, so pretty recently, all things considered. But Nintendo coined the term Picross, picture, cross, and has released games under this like line, this Picross line, starting with the first Mario's Picross on the original Game Boy in 1995. So that game was released in North America, but its sequel on Super Famicom is stuck or was stuck in Japan. More on that in a second. But this specific release is stuck in Japan because that first game in North America failed really badly. So this released later in 1995. The Game Boy game was released in 1995. This was released in September in 1995, only in Japan. It was obviously published by Nintendo, but it was developed by Jupiter Corporation. And Jupiter has a whole bunch of games. I don't know if it's necessarily an in-house studio, but they've been very loyal. If not, they're not a Nintendo studio. Very loyal to Nintendo, very loyal to Pokemon games. And I'm pretty sure they've done all, if not most, of the Picross games specifically. So it's Picross. It's Nintendo-themed, of course. And the only real difference from just a random nonogram would be that you are racing against a clock, and if you don't meet certain penalties, if you don't meet certain requirements, you get penalties for time. And like, for example, if you chisel in the wrong cell, you lose some time off the clock. You could also play in Wario mode. So Wario is also hanging out on here, and even though it's called just Mario no Super Picross. But in the Wario mode, it is a little bit more forgiving. You get a little bit more ambiguity. I think it doesn't necessarily tell you that you're wrong, but there isn't as many penalties. So you got two different modes to juggle with if you're really enjoying yourself. But yeah, it's Nintendo themed. The puzzles are Nintendo pictures, so that's kind of cool. Like I said, this release was stuck in Japan, and has been stuck in Japan for a really long time. So even though just the cartridge was only released in Japan and never left Japan, it did have Virtual Console releases in Japan and Europe in 2006, 2007, 2013, and 2016, but still never came to North America. Until Switch Online 25 years after the original release in September 2020. So if it wasn't on the 25th anniversary, it was pretty damn close. And yeah, it took 25 years for us to get a release here in North America of this specific game, which to me is really weird. I mean, it's a good way to put it on, on Switch Online, makes it very accessible, but I'm pretty sure we've gotten other Picross games from Jupiter, from Nintendo, since then. So why did it take so long for this one to come over? Japan and Europe got all the Virtual Console releases, but we had to wait until the 5th iteration on Switch Online. So I don't know what took so long to get here, but it is cool that we finally got it. Poor us, I guess. And yeah, Mario no Super Picross. So those are all the games I wanted to show off today. We will have plenty more Super Famicom episodes in the future, because I still have so many of them to talk about. But with that said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. If there's anything I got wrong about these games, or anything you want to tell me about these games, please let me know. I would love to continue learning about these games as much as I have hopefully taught you something. So with that said, bye.